Welcome to the Bigger Truth Show. I am Scott McMahon, and I'm excited to bring on a guest. Amy Young has been, she's been kind of a follower and supporter of my work for some time. We actually first talked, I think it was a few months ago, just so that I could hear her story. And I'm going to let Amy tell her story. But I think that she has it's the story that she has to tell is something that I think is really helpful to us, especially coming up to 2026 and helping us to understand and parse through so many psyops, especially within the election integrity space. And so, with no further ado, I am going to. I'm testing a new service, so I'm not really just testing. I've already tested it, but hopefully this works. You're welcome to chat, and hopefully I'll see your responses. But here we are. Amy, welcome to the Bigger Truth Show. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So you live in Northern California, Nevada County, California, and which I've been through there, and that you're kind of in the Sierra Nevadas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is that north of Truckee and that area?
It's west.
Okay, west of Truckee.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, but you've been involved in the Republican Party, in your county Republican Party, and you were the election integrity officer during the 22 election?
2024.
The 2024 election.
Yeah.
Okay. And you actually sued your local county twice, and you got a victory, and we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about how your experience through these lawsuits and the evidence that you held in your hands and that you looked at and that you knocked on doors to acquire ended up changing your views about a lot of things. And so that's I'd like to hear from you this kind of my summary and understanding of your story. So if you could talk about the specific measure that you were fighting in the election and the circumstances around that, and what led you to want to sue your county.
Okay, well, just to be clear, I didn't sue my county twice. My first encounter with the law was after the 2020 election. I began to do public records requests, and those requests, some were fulfilled and some were denied, and the denials just didn't sit right with me. So we filed a writ of mandamus to ask the judge to compel the county to release the records, and I was successful for 3 out of 4 of the records that I sought, and we can get more into each of those. And then the second time I assisted, this is a couple years after that, it was earlier this year after the March primary in California, I just assisted in a lawsuit against a local sales tax measure. So, yeah.
Good. And so that sales tax measure, it was called Measure B, and it was an increase in the local sales tax.
Correct.
And so your local party, and you were very much involved in helping to get out the vote and raise awareness to try to fight that tax increase.
Yes, because that's what Republicans do. We don't want new taxes.
Right. And that's exactly what, especially local parties, should be doing. And my local party, we fight millages, and and that's part of what local Republican parties should do. So kudos to you for doing that and working to help get out the vote and all of the work, because it's a lot of work. It's one thing to say that you're for election integrity, but it's another thing to actually help win elections. And so you were trying to do that, but this measure ended up winning, even though despite your efforts to defeat it, it ended up winning by just 20 votes, right?
Yeah, the margin of victory for Measure B, the sales tax increase, was 20 votes.
Right. And so you wanted the records to you wanted the cast vote record and several different records, and they didn't give it to you, right?
No, that was the records would have been years for the couple years prior after the 2020 election. This Measure B, so we'll talk about Measure B.
Okay.
Being part of the Republican Party in my county, and being the election integrity officer, we get almost daily updates from the county about who voted. And so I don't even know how many, but over the course, the election lasts like a month, basically, election month. And so we would get updates of who had voted countywide. And when it was all said and done, the number of votes cast in the results for in the Measure B contest, which was just in the city limits of City of Grass Valley versus not the whole county. Okay, so we were looking at just a snapshot in the county of people who had voted on Measure B within the city limits. The total number of votes cast was 4,400. But we had a voter file of voters who voted within the City of Grass Valley, so on Measure B, and that voter file was 4,378 voters. So we're looking at this going, where's the 4,400 voters? That was our first question. And that was what we presented to the judge. When I say we, I mean the plaintiff we supported this with our data analysis. So where are these 22 voters? We were 22 voters shy on a measure that passed by 20 votes.
And so this is what you're touching on there is really the crux of the argument that David Clements and who I'm going to be debating next Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. I will be hosting David Clements, and we're going to have a debate, I believe, about election fraud. I'm not sure exactly. It is my show. We're going to be talking about Tina Peters and election fraud, so it should be a lot of fun. But I think that this is a key aspect, and this is part of the reason why I wanted to have you on, because you came to me and said, "Hey, I see that you're debating Clements, and this is one of their key arguments, and this is why it's just not true." And so, but what you saw was exactly what they argued to be proof of fraud, which is the voter record or the cast vote record having fewer votes than the official tally of votes. And so on paper and to any rational person, that sounds like it would be proof of fraud.
Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, that's all true.
Right.
Like what's going on? But and think of it as a headline. If we would have just gone voter file, official results, 22 discrepancy, that headline alone would prompt so many conclusions that we through our research and court orders from the judge, which we can talk about, we've basically disproved.
Mm-hmm. So how did that, let's walk me through that. How did that process, what did you discover? How did you discover it? So where were those 22 missing voters?
Where were they? Right. So, I talked to an attorney, told him, what we're seeing, and, he takes it to court. There's a plaintiff who stepped up bravely to, I didn't have standing. I was not the plaintiff because I did not reside within the city limits of Grass Valley. So I could not be the plaintiff. And we had a Republican who was sympathetic to our cause and wanted to do that and represent this cause. So we went to court, and the judge, the county kept telling us, the Republican Party got the records, and we're not supposed to share those voter files. We're not just supposed to be giving them out. So we needed the county to give the voter files, access to the voter files, and the county. This is what makes them look terrible. Is they just shut it down. They told the judge, they moved to dismiss. They did not want any discovery of any kind. We're just conspiracy theorists, and so that but the judge wasn't having it. The judge took my affidavit. I was an affiant in the case. I provided an affidavit based on what I had seen. The judge took it seriously, and I believe that this judge has a love of the truth. And he went ahead and he ordered the county to give up the records, and it took a while. So I'm going to pause and let you ask a question.
Yeah. So they blocked the information. They didn't want you to have access to this, and that effort by it tends to be clerks on the left to prevent transparency and to prevent citizens from having access to voter records and seeing inside the box and all of that. That really does a lot to fuel the conspiracy theories. It's almost like they want us to doubt what they're doing and the legitimacy of what they're doing, and to raise these arguments and to file what end up becoming, in most cases, becoming bad lawsuits, because these lawsuits are being filed because they have the appearance of being bad actors, of being dishonest in some way, because there's something to hide. People don't hide stuff unless they have something to hide. Generally, I mean, that's kind of what we think, right? And they were certainly acting like they had something to hide.
Yeah, and we'll get more into that too when we talk about my separate action for public records after the 2020 election. It was worse then. So.
But it was very parallel. So, okay. So what did you do? How did you get the judge granted you discovery?
So he did. He let it go forward. He was not impressed by the county yet again trying to shut us down and not being transparent. So it did go forward, and what we found, and how this relates to the claim that I think Dr. Frank and Clements are making about these votes are just manufactured. This discrepancy, I worked with a data researcher, or my county chair, to parse through the voter files and locate. I'm going to try not to get too technical, but it's basically processing, cross-referencing data sets to be able to identify the voters that appeared at one point, and then because their voter record changed within the course of the election, they're appearing, but they're no longer appearing at the same address. So if we're looking at a subset in the city of Grass Valley versus the county as a whole, and a lot of these voters are doing within county moves, we basically, long story short, we were able to locate these voters. They were there. They were people. I mean, I talked to one myself. He's like, yeah, I voted and then I moved. I was sick of the homeless people. So it's just.
So what you're saying is you by studying the data, you were able to identify who those missing 22 voters were.
Yeah.
And then look them up, or at least who they were most likely to be. And then, and
we had to serve subpoenas because this for the legal action. Were they there? Did they vote a legitimate ballot in the Measure B election? So in the process of serving subpoenas is where we learned, these people are here.
Okay, so
they were there.
So where did they go from the list? How did they disappear from the list?
Yeah, so this is key, and this is key to understanding the voter files. Is the way that, at least in California, and I think it's done similarly nationwide, but I can't speak to that. Is you have the voter file is a fluid document, and this is what the county also said repeatedly in court. They don't, if I go vote in an election, I vote with my name and my address where I was at the time. But if I move the next day, or if I go to the DMV and change my address, or say I'm arrested and another state agency accesses the voter file, and I'm in a different address the next day, the role changes as well. So I now appear to be voting from somewhere else, where in reality I voted at the time that I voted at a certain address. Does that make sense? So the voter record continues to change in detail. So the farther out you go from an election, the voter file will be more and more inaccurate with respect to that particular election. Does that make sense?
Yes, because more people move, the more time goes on. So, and it's not just like you said. So it's not just moving. It's also, maybe they go to prison, maybe they die. So there's different things that can happen to a voter after the election, and that happens actually at a pretty high frequency.
Yeah, and that should be changed, in my opinion. I'm not an expert on managing voter databases, but I guess I have some experience. Is that you would expect that especially a federal record like a voter file, would not alter for an election, whereas a fluid document like, yes, voter files are constantly being updated. That should change, but who voted and from where, you would expect that would stay the same. So if you're Dr. Frank going to a Secretary of State and saying, give me a list of who voted in a certain election, that they could easily produce that file. But they can't. They can't produce it. I don't know if that's by design. They want to make it harder to reconstruct an election, but it is a reality, and that is what we found with Measure B in the city of Grass Valley. It doesn't allow us to make a conclusion that there's less voters than there are votes. That we proved literally by knocking on doors, serving subpoenas.
So what you, through your research then for this lawsuit, and so how much did Measure B fail by? How many votes?
20 votes.
So it was 20 votes. There were, on paper, this looked like, it was a slam dunk lawsuit. You're 20 votes, and yet it shows there looks like there's 22 fewer vote records than there are votes and in the election.
Yeah, and I think that's why the judge took it seriously. We did not allege fraud. We did not allege voting machine fraud. We just said, I provided an affidavit based on what I had seen, that this measure passed by 20 votes, and I've got a voter file here that's 22 voters shy. Yeah. And by the way, the county never did give us a definitive list of who voted. They finally provided another list, and this is also interesting for what we're talking about with time passing. They finally provided another list. That second list was not, it was actually worse than the first one we had, because they basically just took another snapshot of who had voted in the whole county. And so you go through and you filter out within the city of Grass Valley. Again, the county's like 70,000 voters, but the Measure B contest was 4,400 voters. Does that make sense? That within the city limits of the county at large. And that file was more inaccurate. However, it was more inaccurate in terms, if you can imagine, people had left the city of Grass Valley, but people had also moved in. So people who appear to have voted within the city of Grass Valley in the Measure B contest didn't vote in that contest at all for the election. They just moved into the city after the election. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So you have people moving in and people moving out, and that's all that this second voter file reflected. However, the file that they gave us included a number of canceled voters who had been, strangely, removed from the voter rolls when they had just voted. A couple of deaths.
What could be the explanation for that?
I honestly am under, I think it's I was given that file as a confidential file, and I had to sign that I would keep it confidential. But I don't know. There's all kinds of reasons why a voter could be canceled. Voter records can be merged. You go by the voter ID number. They can merge a file, but long story short, this list included a number of voters that we hadn't been able to see previously, including people who had passed away. It wasn't a lot, but they don't include those. And it wasn't. And by the way, there were no confidential voters. So in this case, you couldn't attribute like the 22 missing voters. You could not attribute those to confidential voter records, like the Safe at Home program. So anyway, this second file that we did finally get, we were still able to piece together based on ballot type, ballots that had the Measure B contest on it. Just doggedly looking for these voters. The county didn't do that. We did. I did not want to be surprised in court. I did not want to pursue a legal action that didn't have merit. We just were looking for the truth. We were looking for these voters. And it was like a full-time job. We went through, compared the data sets, and lined them up.
So then once you discovered that, and you really kind of proved to yourself that the outcome really wasn't determined by fraud, right?
Yeah, I would say that the missing 22 voters was not machine fraud. They weren't missing, they were there. It proved that it wasn't machine fraud, but it also proved that the voter file is mail-in voting is a mess. the way the voter roll is maintained at the state and county level is a mess. So yeah, we learned a lot. We did not pursue it. We moved to dismiss because we just felt that it was the honest thing to do, because I had located, we had located the missing voters. However, we still had something like 39 people who were registered, we believed were registered at businesses within the city, as opposed to registered from their residential address. You have to legally vote from where you reside. So had we wanted to pursue that, we could have, but we were looking to overturn Measure B because we didn't want a new sales tax.
But that fundamental and this whole point that Dr. Frank has raised so much money promoting this, he says, I think he calls it like his polynomial
algorithm.
Yeah.
Kind of a graph, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so many of the election integrity grifters use that same argument, which was the fundamental argument of your lawsuit. And by getting boots on the ground and actually analyzing the data, and through subpoenas, you proved that it was a fallacy. It did not apply.
That particular detail was a fallacy. Yes.
At least in your county, do you think that this is a universal fallacy, or?
I can speak to the state of California. If like I said, the way that the voter rolls are maintained, they're fluid, whereas an election is not. It's fixed. Who voted and from where is fixed. So the longer you wait, the further it goes out day by day from when that particular voter voted. It's going to be more and more inaccurate. So if you're going to counties and secretaries of state and asking for a record of who voted in a particular election, a fixed event, that's going to be off because of the way that people move. And the Secretary of State in California could put an end to all this if they kept a file of who voted and from what address they voted. They could provide that as proof to say, this is who voted. We have exactly the number of voters, and exactly, in the case of local measures, they voted in that particular measure legitimately. That could easily be put to bed. So, right. But it just goes on.
But that's also not a solution that the election integrity grifters advocate for. They don't really advocate for that.
Yeah, they just take
they just want no machines. They want to, like Mike Lindell says, he wants to bury the machines at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
And so, and on that, I want to share, because you have advocated in the past for no machines and for hand counting only. As I believed at one time that the machines were the cause. I mean, that they were running a very, very effective, very deliberate PSYOP campaign to try to convince us that it was the machine, starting even the day after the 2020 election, as I've talked about. But
Yeah,
Um,
we were looking for, I was looking for answers, and they seem to have answers.
right, right. And so you were actually written up in the Gateway Pundit over, and this was your first lawsuit? Is this?
Yeah, this is pertaining to after 2020. I wanted to, I saw the headlines coming from people like Dr. Frank, just, and I was like, well, that's really interesting. That seems legit. I live in Nevada County. I'm gonna see if any of this applies to, I'm gonna see what I can figure out in my own county. So I started to do public records requests for election records from 2020.
Okay, and so this was written up. Brian Lupo, I think that's Capcom, isn't it? Isn't he?
I don't know.
Okay, but in any event, October 9th, 2023, and it says California County ordered to pay $85,000 for unlawfully withholding 2020 boring public election records. Do you want me to show this video of you speaking to the Nevada County Board of Supervisors?
Sure, I think if you want to.
Yeah, I think it's good.
This is before we ever went to
Good
court.
morning. My name is Amy Young. Excuse me. I would like to begin by saying that I have spent some time observing this election, and I saw a lot of good people doing their jobs. I compliment the office staff and the temporary election workers who were always friendly and professional. It is important in the debate about elections to stop and acknowledge the human element and give them credit for their hard work. These are our friends and neighbors. I am here to exercise my First Amendment right to free speech, to peacefully express my disapproval of using voting machines to count our ballots. I ask you to move the county elections to a paper-based, hand-counted system. Do the people of Nevada County have the right to audit all non-identifying election records? After many public records requests for audit logs, adjudication logs, cast vote records, tabulation tapes, and other records, I can tell you that the answer is a resounding no. I am not talking about a forensic audit, and I have never advocated for one. I am simply asking to review reports that the system can easily generate. This is a total lack of transparency. We are limited to what we can physically observe during an election. While this is very helpful, and I encourage all people to do it starting today, it is not adequate. I am asking for records of what happened inside the machines, records that should be open to independent analysis. No special knowledge or credentials should be needed to verify any level of the voting process. Some other things to consider. The source code to these machines is proprietary. By law, it is kept under lock and key in escrow. How do we know what this software is really programmed to do? The Heart Verity 3.1 system is not federally approved by the EAC. Moreover, it runs on a Windows 7 operating system, which is unsupported as of January 2020. Our poll book, maintained through DEMS Runback, is connected to the internet. What is stopping malicious actors from accessing the voter rolls and fraudulently casting mail-in ballots? The numerous instances of voter already voted in the recall, where voters went in to vote in person and were told they had already voted per the voter history file, are cause to believe this could be happening. What I suggest the board do is simple. Stop approving funding for future purchases and software agreements for voting machines and any related system. Ask the clerk to put together a proposal of what hand counting would entail using paper poll books. Give the people of this county a voting system with no hidden parts. God bless you and peace be with you.
Well, I think so you did a great job with your presentation there, and there's several things. I definitely agree with you that, and with you then, and I think you still agree with you then now when it comes to we need more transparency. there we definitely need more transparency. The proprietary software is a huge barrier to transparency. I think the voters need, especially in this technological age, every aspect of counting our votes, every aspect of being able to view and count. And we should be able to verify the count online on our own computers at home. Everybody should, without having to file a FOIA. It should just be something that everybody can go and do if they have any doubts about it, and see scans of the original ballots, and every aspect of it should be public information. And if they really wanted to build confidence in our election system, that's what they would do. Okay, count them. Prove
Right.
it.
We have
Yeah.
nothing to hide. Everything we
Exactly.
did holds up to scrutiny. Try to shoot it down,
Yep. But I think that they want us to have doubts. They want us to have fears. They want to destabilize the our population in this country. I think it relates to the Cloward and Piven strategy, which is a Marxist strategy. Cloward and Piven wrote papers in a book about how to promote communism just through inciting and creating chaos in society. And so I think that's part of it. It's probably not all of it. There's probably a bunch of laziness on people's parts and everything else, and just fear. But I mean, why do you think that your local county, your county clerk, just flat out denied giving you access to those records?
My county clerk, she's not, I would call her hostile to, I guess, to people like me. When I took them to court for the public records, one of their exhibits in opposition to my writ of mandamus was an LA Times article. Am I still with you? Because I
Yeah.
said, okay. Was an LA Times article about J6ers. And somehow trying to associate me with the insurrection at the Capitol. And so that just paints, her attitude towards me was that I'm a conspiracy theorist and I don't need these records. They had so many arguments for why I shouldn't have them. So I don't know what motivates them, but
well, and I think it's different for everyone, of course.
Yeah.
But generally, it's the same thing. What was motivating people during COVID to require to be masked Nazis, and said that they wouldn't go over to family members' houses if they didn't get vaccinated. It's some form of mass formation psychosis, and it's the psyops really on both sides, that are really confusing and dividing us from each other. So do you still believe that it was the machines? Do you still believe that the solution is hand counting ballots?
No, I don't. I think that the voting machines, and they're just computers. They're just HP or Dell computers. Dominion runs on Dell. Hart Verity, Hart InterCivic software runs on HP computers. I went through all that too. They're running software. It's just computers running software. The solution, I think, is total transparency. By the way, the city of San Francisco had been releasing the records I was asking for, posting them online, including ballot images, for years, because of a local sunshine ordinance that they had. So we were literally just asking for the same level of transparency that San Francisco of all places, had been enjoying since the 90s. And it's important to note, with no harm resulting from it. So there had been that level of transparency with ballot images where no voter was ever harassed. Nobody ever looked through and figured out, oh, John Smith on such and such avenue cast that ballot for that person and we're going to go harass him. That's illegal, by the way, to do that. So, but my county, in the process of this writ of mandamus, they alleged that I was trying to gain access to voters, that I wanted to figure out how people had voted. It was these like straw man arguments to paint me as basically a bad person or someone who wanted to break the law, when I was just looking for transparency. So back to the solution. The solution is more transparency, and I also think that the voting systems should not be pushed on counties that don't need or want them. That just makes the state of California look bad. After my win in court for 3 out of the 4 public records, which were cast vote records, audit logs, and the tabulator tapes, I did not get the ballot images because of a California Constitution clause that says voting shall be secret. But after my win, the California legislature and the Secretary of State responded with drafting legislation and regulations that basically shut down access to all the records that I had just gotten. In the legislation, they literally added my court, my record into the background for the legislation, saying that I had done this and that it needs to be stopped. So it just makes it look even worse. And now we have no transparency. I can't get the audit logs anymore. The cast vote record that I was able to obtain, and that I know Mike Lindell had at one point said, like, told everyone, go get the cast vote record. The cast vote record is basically the electronic record of a ballot. It's everything on a ballot, except it's not the image of the ballot, it's just the data from the ballot. And it can be really useful to a political party, or say you just are a nerd and you want to analyze an election. But what they do now via regulations is they tell people like me, oh, we'll give you the cast vote record, you can have it in PDF. So you can't download data from a PDF. It's
Right.
Yeah, so
you can't put that into a spreadsheet and you can't analyze it. I mean, it
No.
doesn't really do you any good.
no. So of course we have, like, they're taking away the transparency. It looks terrible on their part, but I'm not going to be manipulated. I'm still making my own conclusions, and that's the biggest lesson I've learned in this whole process is, like, trust but verify. I have to be able to verify it myself. I'm not going to follow anyone anymore. People, if somebody's making money, if they're raising a bunch of money for this cause and I don't know where it's going, I'm just not interested in that person. I've got to verify for myself. So, but yeah, one last thing is, I was saying counties should be able to choose. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Shasta County in Northern California in 2022 voted, the Board of Supervisors, what you know as the county commissioners, they voted to get rid of their Dominion voting system. And the California legislature and Secretary of State responded by mandating that counties use a voting system. So again, like, the county decided not to use it, but they're forcing the county to use it. We have counties, I have a neighboring county in California that has like 2,000 voters.
In the whole county.
In the whole county. Why would you, if supervisors decided, we're just going to hand count, why would you want to force them to purchase a voting system? So I think the solution is not to just throw them all in the ocean. It's to be more reasonable about it, to allow more transparency, and to let people decide if they want to use a voting system in their elections. Mm-hmm. And Trump seems to see that too. If you look at his executive order on preserving election integrity, he talks about other things that we should be talking about, I think, where the crux is, and it has to do with voter rolls and voter list maintenance, and making sure that legal voters are voting. And
Voter ID, citizenship.
Voter ID,
Yep.
cross-referencing databases between the DHS and secretaries of state. So I think they kind of know what the gist is. They are requiring more stringent certification of the machines using updated parameters, but they're not saying get rid of the voting systems.
Right. And And that's really the key. That's kind of what I've been. I did a couple podcasts about it back in October, November, saying this is what the solutions that I think we need, because the Flynn Network had been running with their trilogy or their trinity of solutions, which is no machines, hand count, paper ballots, and the left does the same thing, where they put forward a solution that is politically impossible, and that isn't really a solution. Like zero emissions, net zero emissions.
Like a straw man solution.
Right, exactly. And that's exactly 100% what this no machines, paper ballots, hand count. First of all, paper ballots is moot, because in just about every state and every across the country, they already use paper ballots. I mean, there are some states that use touchscreen voting, and I think that's a huge problem. But almost every state does paper ballots anyway. So like that's dumb. So really, they're saying there are two solutions: or no machines and hand count, and which are really the same idea. I mean, if you have no machines, how else are you going to count them except by hand? I would much rather have agnostic machines, scanners, tabulating and scanning the ballots quickly, than a bunch of flawed human beings that all have an agenda. And
as long as we should be able to review that software.
Right, exactly. There just needs to be
open.
It needs to be open source, and that was part of the solutions. It needs to be open source. We need to have transparency into the process. We need to be able to audit and see the security. We need to see, it would be helpful to be able to look into the machines before and after election.
Yeah,
and,
you can see
to look at the software to see if it's been tampered with.
Yeah.
Right. So, so those are solutions, and they're solutions really not necessarily to fraud. They would prevent fraud, but they would present and promote transparency ultimately. And that is our greatest need when it comes to elections, is security and transparency. And that's where our focus needs to be. But instead they put it onto the machines because it's politically unfeasible. Mm-hmm. And they want no early voting at all, no mail-in voting. And I think that's completely politically unfeasible. And they also they say you can't outvote the fraud, and they also say that early voting is a scam or something. And that was one of the measuring sticks to me in 2024.
What did we just do?
Right.
They're acting like they lost an election.
Right.
Trump's president. Isn't that what they want? They're not happy. We didn't outvote the fraud, or are they saying that it's a legitimate election as well? I would like them to clarify that. Exactly.
Yeah. And I hope to hear clarification from Mr. Clements on that next week. So, and then what is the solution? Because you trace the whole idea to its logical conclusion, and if there is no hope through our election system, we can't change our state laws unless we win elections. I mean, you can't do it.
Yeah.
What Trump is doing is great. What he's doing is saying, okay, if you want federal dollars through the FEC, then and because there's all kinds of grants and federal dollars that go to states and municipalities to help them administer elections. If you want those dollars, here's what you got to do. You got to do voter ID. You got to check citizenship. You got to have some transparency and controls. And they're all common sense solutions that they're putting forward. But there's 18 states that are suing, including my Michigan. I'm sure your California is one of those states as well, that are suing Trump to try to prevent that from happening, because they want the dollars with no strings attached.
Right. And I would say that when you want to control people, you make them hopeless. So to tell voters that it's hopeless to vote, and I want to talk about my contact with these types of voters, is that's the first step in making them give up their constitutional right to vote. And even at my lowest, in terms of believing that the elections were legitimate, like at that time when the video that we played, and I felt that hand counting was the answer, and in the machines there's no point in voting anymore. I didn't vote because I was like, that's my constitutional right. I am not going to vacate the battlefield. I'm not going to give up my constitutional right because of this. I'm going to continue to exercise it, and nobody should give up their constitutional right to vote. I want to say that as election integrity officer for my local Republican Party, I was also tasked with answering the campaign phone, which was the iPhone for our party during the election. It was like a full-time job. I took so many calls from these voters who I had to convince to vote. We do encourage people to vote in person. The mail-in voting just takes so long for them to process the ballots. But I would always say, if you can't vote in person, just cast the darn ballot any way that you can. The Flynn Network has done an excellent job at promoting among the Republican population or the conservative population this hopelessness that there's no point in voting. And because I spoke to these people, they're just like wringing their hands, or they're blowing us off as the Republican Party trying to get out the vote calls. Like, why would you even bother? And I'm like, listen, you wouldn't believe what I've been through to get to about this. I couldn't even tell them everything that I had done, which we talked about. I'm like, but you've got to still vote. And yes, I would tell them all, we need transparency. We need more of this. And please join me after the election. Let's do this. But for now, cast the darn ballot. So overcoming that obstacle is so huge. And if you wanted, who benefits from Republicans not voting? I mean, the opponent. So
That's right.
it's very frustrating, and I experienced it firsthand and spoke to these voters, many of them, and that's just in my little county. That message is pervasive, and it's working. So, yeah, I would like them to be acknowledge that. And then you have the Secretary of State and these Democrat rubber stamp legislatures making it worse. So you have them coming from one end, telling Republican voters that it's hopeless and suppressing the vote. And then you have the Secretary of State, the Democrat Secretary of State and legislatures coming from the other end to make, it looks terrible. There's no transparency. They're shutting down access to records. Yeah.
Yep. And I mean, to me, in my view, when you have a large cohesive network that is uniformly promoting a narrative that it's all rigged, so what's the point? And they're promoting this endlessly over and over, and they're using very calculated psychological tactics to emotionally engage people into hopelessness and despair. And then they also parrot the belief that every judge is corrupt, that the police is corrupt, the local politics, that's all corrupt. And so if you have no hope in local government, state government, national government, and you have no hope in elections, where do you find your hope? It's through bad means. And that's I don't see how just applying logic to it. Dennis Prager he was the first that I heard it from, saying that the way to discern whether or not an idea is true is to follow that idea through to its ultimate logical conclusion. And when we follow the idea that these people promote to its logical conclusion, it is the ultimate destruction of our country. And I think that is, whether they know it or not, they might be living in a state of cognitive dissonance and avoiding thinking through their ideas, just like the left does. But there is, and I saw the exact same thing here in Michigan that you were describing with voters, that they just believe that it's all rigged. So what's the point? And this is the genius of President Trump. Is it in was it 4 words? Too big to rig. He overcame that, and with those 4 words, he acknowledged that, okay, yeah, they rig elections, but we're going to be bigger than that. So he's not trying to talk them out of their high horse. He recognizes, okay, and he's contributed to it too, because he's talked a lot about, how rigged the system is and everything else. And yes, I think that there was fraud in 2020. I think that they played all kinds of funny business with the voter rolls, and there were people that were non-voters that were mailed ballots to that voted on a large scale. And But there was a ballot for every vote. It was never the machines, and I think they knew that, and that's the most insidious part of the whole thing. That there was deliberate deceit. So,
Yeah,
where
if we put our hope in the Lord Jesus Christ, then we won't be transferring our need for that hope onto other people.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's the great irony is that they all pretend to be Christians. They all put forward this idea that they're Christian nationalists, and that they talk about God, they talk about Jesus, they talk about prayer, and yet they also try to rob people of all hope. And so, the two things just they can't coincide. And so, our hope is 100% in Jesus Christ, and they can't take that away from us. And so they prey on people who are Bible illiterate and easy to manipulate and low information, and they have it down to a science on how to manipulate these people. So,
yeah, and I would also like to point out that I know some people, and I don't think these people are going to be happy with me because I think that they're connected with what you would call the Flynn Network. They're good people, brothers and sisters in Christ. If they're watching this, they'll know who you know who you are. I just want to say that those people, the what I would call like the data scientists, they're still voting. They're closer with the data, and I don't know what their exact reasoning is, but they haven't seen enough such that they're never going to vote again. They're still casting their ballot, but the message that's getting out wide scale to the population of Republicans or conservatives is don't vote, and that message is effective for people who aren't close to it. So just keep in mind, if you're considering not voting, people like me and other people who are analyzing the data, we're still voting.
And we have a very consequential election coming up in just over a year, and that's going to determine to a large degree, how successful President Trump can be in doing what most of the vast majority of Americans who voted for him, they really want him to accomplish his agenda. And so we need to make sure that he's got the support in Congress that he needs to be able to get stuff done. And even more than that, on a local level, it's so important. If we really want to, if we want the transparency that we're talking about, if we want the changes in election laws that we're talking about, we have to win local elections. We have to win our statewide elections.
Mm-hmm.
We got to win take back our houses and our senates.
Yes, and that's done county by county. And instead of advocating for hand counting or taking classes on how to do a hand count a month before an election, which is such a distraction, get involved in getting out the vote for your local and your congressional Republicans, so that you can send Trump into his second 2 years with a House and Senate majority. But the narrative coming from the Flynn Network that there's not going to be an election. I had people coming to my election integrity, my poll observer training, saying there's not even going to be an election. So they were
doing that there too in California.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so it's like, if people are thinking that there's not even going to be an election, how are they going to get involved in the months prior to an election in getting out the vote and getting geared up? You have to start. It starts so much before that. And so I can see that the value for them in that message is people aren't going to get involved. Why should they? There's not even going to be one. And same with hand counting. If you're trying to, hand counting is not going to happen, at least not right now. Just get involved in getting out the vote, getting the people to cast their darn ballot.
Yeah, get out there, knock on doors, make phone calls, do what you got to do to help get out the vote. If you really care about election integrity and you're not doing that, you're a liar and a hypocrite.
We had local victories in our county and in the city of Grass Valley, and I know we're trying to wrap it up, because of our get out the vote efforts, because of just old-fashioned door knocking. That the hardest job to do, but if you do it, you will see Republicans will realize victories even in plus Dem districts.
Yes, absolutely. it is universal, it's timeless, and if somebody knocks on your door as a voter and they're a friendly face and they listen to you and what your concerns are, and you see that they're like a real person and they care, you're going to vote. It's just astounding how effective that is. There's nothing that is more effective than that. And that is how we change. That's how we win our country back. That's how we win our states back. That's how we win our communities back. And it's, we've got all kinds of problems that are bigger than politics. But the Republican Party, I have been saying this for a long time, and I don't know why this is controversial, but the Republican Party is the best solution to our political problems. And so, there's all of these voices, and it's an anti-Republican insurgency within the Republican Party that's promoting the idea that, and they often justify it by saying, the founding fathers didn't believe in political parties anyway, so if it all burns down, so be it. Meaning, if the Republican Party burns down, so be it. If the Republican Party, the stupidity is just unbelievable. If the Republican Party burns down, that leaves us with the Democrat Party, which is clearly a communist Marxist party. And, it's just, the stupidity is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
That they are so willing and eager to throw this whole country away by throwing away the Republican Party.
And if you don't like your Republican Party, become part of it. Right. Don't just sit back. That's why I got involved. I was irritated with my local Republican Party for not doing what I was doing when you saw me at on the Gateway Pundit talking to my supervisors. So I was like, gosh darn it, so I started getting involved. And of course, if you're a productive person, you start to be, So I put my money where my mouth was. I saw that Trump was trying to remake the Republican Party. And I was like, I'm going to stick with this. And so I got involved and don't regret doing it. It definitely was a lot of time commitment, but I started to, it's so cheesy, but just become the solution in the Republican Party that I wanted to see, and I'm not saying I was the solution, but I tried to make it more like me, more like what I wanted. So people should do that. Don't just sit back and call us all rhinos. Get involved. If you don't like your local Republican Party, start going to the meetings and hear what they have to say, hear what's going on. Just find out how you can get involved and help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And avoid the gatekeepers and think for yourself.
Yeah.
And ask questions and, don't be afraid to challenge narratives and try to do the right thing. You're going to make mistakes. We all do. I'm a county commissioner in my little county, and so I'm dealing with all of that stuff. I'm involved in my local party, and that is how we do it. And it's a volunteer organization. The purpose of the Republican Party is to win elections for Republicans. And by doing that, if we win enough elections and we get enough good people, we can push for better candidates before the primary, and then we push for Republicans after the primary, and whoever that nominee may be. And because usually, and this is something that people say, I'm done making the less bad choice, but that's what politics is. Mm-hmm. In this fallen world, every election, 100% of elections are going to be between at best bad and less bad.
Go find a candidate then.
Right. Yeah. Even the best candidates are flawed.
Challenge you.
Right. Yeah, they're really flawed and less flawed because every candidate is flawed.
They're just people. If you don't like it, go find the people.
Yeah, or run yourself.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
There's not a magic source of candidates. The Republican Party has to connect with them, and hopefully. So if you don't like your candidates, go find some. Encourage your friends and neighbors.
Yes,
it's absolutely. Of the people, right? Government of the people. You've got to be the people.
Right. And I think that the broader solution, I think anybody listening to this probably wants to make America great again. And, it's an aspirational message. And I think we all want to see a better America, even right and left. This isn't like a Republican idea. We all want to see a better America. And the way to do that is to become better people. And so, work to be a better mother, father, husband, wife, son, daughter, employer, employee, whatever roles God has put you in, work to do better in that role, and work to make your family better, work to make your community better, work to make your local party better. You know, and you know that's all we could do, right? and you know, just do what we can and leave the rest up to God. So, Amy, you've done a lot of that. I really applaud your courage, and I mean, it takes a lot of grit to do what you did. You know, to actually go to court twice, you know, against your local county, and all of the time and all of the research and everything that you've put into it. And thank you for your courage in coming on and talking about this and sharing your story publicly. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance to share the story.
Yeah. Well, it's good, and I hope that it's helpful for everyone. And until next time, which will be on Tuesday for me. I'm going to have David Clements, and it should be a lot of fun. We will talk about some of these things and others, and I'm really excited to see how that goes. So,
I'll be on the chat.
yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, join in on the chat, and it'll be fun. So, all right. Well, thank you, Amy, and just have a blessed rest of your day.
You too. God bless. Thank you.
All right, God bless you. Bye.